Hi, Susanna Anderson here with the Are They All Yours blog at StephenAndersonFamily.com. Today I want to talk about freezer meals, and specifically freezer meals preparing for a new baby, or maybe you have some other situation coming up. Maybe you're traveling and you want to leave meals at home for your family, but predominantly I use the system when I have a new baby. I am currently pregnant with our 11th child, so I've done this a time or two. And I have developed a system that works really well for us, and I want to talk to you about it. The first part of my system is that I keep a file in Google Drive of all the meals that I'm working on and that I have stashed in the freezers. And the reason for that is that, of course, it helps me inventory everything and keep track of everything. But the reason why I do it in Google Drive is because it allows me to make changes from my phone, my laptop, the home computer. It can never get lost. It always automatically backs up Drive. Now, I don't start a new file every time I have a baby. I made the file one time, and if you do it in sheets in Google Drive, you can just keep adding new sheets. So I have a sheet for baby number 10, baby number 9, baby number 11. If I go on an extended trip and the kids stay home with grandma and I leave them meals, I have a list on there. So I start a new sheet as a subcategory of the existing file every time I have a new event, and that also allows me to just get ideas from the old sheets and copy and paste over. So to give you an idea of what it looks like, I just kind of printed out from the existing sheet, the current one, which is baby number 11, of how my system works. So basically at the top, and this is all on one big sheet in the thing, I just printed it separate so you can see it better. So these are the breakfasts. I typically aim for 20 breakfasts, because between 20 breakfasts and cereals, my goal is to have about 30 meals total, 30 breakfasts, 30 lunches, 30 dinners. That typically gets us through 6 weeks after the baby, and by then I'm usually up to cooking. So for breakfast, I make 20 because there's also cereal and toast and sausages and easy things like that. So green means I've already made it. Yellow means that's a meal I'm planning on making and have yet to make. And once the baby is here and we eat the food, I put the foods that we have eaten in red, meaning that they're gone. So you can see these are the things that I have already made for this baby number 11. It tells me what to look for in the freezer as far as what kind of a container it's in, exactly which freezer location, and then some directions of how to heat it, warm it, and how much I can expect to feed. So I have 2 sheets of that here. This is the second sheet. So the yellow ones I'm still working on. Now we have 3 freezers. We have 2 fridge freezer combos. One is where the freezer's on top and the fridge is on the bottom. One is a side-by-side fridge freezer. And then we also have a stand-up dedicated deep freezer. So that's what that means. The office freezer is the fridge freezer combo in the office. The kitchen freezer is the fridge freezer combo in the kitchen. And then the stand-up freezer is just a dedicated deep freezer that we have. So these are the breakfasts. Here is a list of the dinner. The system is identical. And here is the second page of the dinners I still have to make. In addition to that, I also keep side dishes, which there isn't much, but just the little things that we need. Like I always need to make broth. We like to have batter for corn muffins on hand. And then also I like to have the lactation cookies and things like that. So I'm still working on this. In addition to this, I have made a list of breakfasts and lunches and dinners that really anyone can throw together. And then I also have a list down here of foods to have on hand for my birth team, as well as for myself for labor. Now, if you home birth like I do, you really want to get with your midwife or your birth team and ask them what they are looking for. So my list is just based on what my midwife has expressed, or she doesn't really express because she's just thankful to have food, but things that I know she will enjoy. One of the biggest challenges for birth people and midwives and doulas and whatnot going to home birth is that they often go hours, sometimes days on site without having any decent food. I guess a lot of parents don't think to have food for the birth team in the house, and they're so involved in the birth and so absorbed in that, and they're not eating, that they forget the birth team. So you want to keep your people well fed. So I like to have that idea, and I put that on the fridge so ahead of time people can see that. I also, once I know I'm in labor, I like to throw one final meal in the crock pot, just something that it cooks pretty much by itself and is good post-labor, heats up nice, and it's just a dish that everybody will like. And then the last sheet that I have on there is just things to always keep on hand. This list is not conclusive. I'm going to have this on the fridge and just keep adding to it with just stuff that I want to make sure I have in the house before I go into labor so I don't have to go to the store. If I do have to go to the store, thankfully now there's Instacart and they deliver everything, and I am so happy with that. So I keep these lists on hand, either pinned to the fridge or in the kitchen, and that way whenever I cook, I update it on here in pencil, then I put it in my Google Drive file when I sit down at the computer, and then every few days or every couple of weeks I print a fresh list when it's updated. Now, as far as storing food, I do not have a Food Saver or similar brand vacuum sealer. I don't know if that would help save space or preserve it better, so I'm just going to talk about what I do for now. The most space efficient way I have found to store foods is to put anything like a casserole or anything like that into these half-size aluminum pans. One of these is about equivalent in amount to a 10 by 13 casserole dish. And you can buy the lids to go with these, or you can just use aluminum foil to cover them. So you want to cover that with aluminum. But then in addition, over the aluminum, I like to put press and seal over it just as an extra protective layer from freezer burn. And of course you want to label everything, and you want to label it before it goes in the fridge or freezer, because once you put that in the fridge and freezer, the minute you pull it out, there's condensation. The Sharpie will no longer work. So I put the food in and I label it. I let it cool in the fridge before moving it to the freezer. For things like soups and stuff, and sauces, gravies, broth, I love these deli quart containers. I use these for so many things. They stack really nicely in the freezers. They take up very little space. So these are ideal for storing soups or even some stews, as well as broth, or we freeze lemon juice in them in the winter when we have a lot of lemons. So I love these. These are very inexpensive on Amazon. And once you use them, you can just put them in the dishwasher and keep reusing them. And then finally, for some things, I obviously use the freezer bags. So I have the gallon and the quart size freezer bags. Now, if you have a limited freezer space, like we all do, you want to cut down on the unnecessary bulk in the freezer as much as possible. So not only eliminating dead space by optimizing how much you're able to stack the goods, but the other thing is that I like to make dishes where I can just put a side on in addition to it that'll bulk it up. For instance, when I make spaghetti, I freeze just the spaghetti sauce, and then my kids can cook the noodles fresh and mix it. So when you're thinking about making meals to freeze for after the baby, think of meals where the bulk of the meal does not need to be frozen and can just simply be made. So going over my list, some of the things that I do. If you look at the muffins are great because muffins, I just freeze the batter. And the batter takes up a lot less space than the frozen muffins do, because the frozen muffins have a lot of air between them, whereas the batter just fills up 1 or 2 of these gallon bags. Another popular one is fruit crumble topping. The topping does not take up much space. So all one of the kids needs to do, or my husband or my mother-in-law, whoever's here helping, is that they basically take canned fruit, they just drain it, dump it on a casserole dish, and then they crumble the topping on it and then bake it. As far as dinners, some of the dinners that are really easy to make, like I said, are the ones that have pasta on the side. So chicken paprika, I only have to make the sauce and the meat, and then they make the noodles fresh and dump them on it. Same, for example, with things like spaghetti, where I freeze the sauce only, or the meatloaf, potatoes and gravy. I only freeze the meatloaf, so they only take up the space of the meatloaves as well as the gravy, but then the potatoes can be made fresh on the side. Taco pasta, again, I only make the sauce. You just want to think about meals where you don't have to freeze the starch with it. Number one, the starch doesn't taste good thawed out. And number two, the starch is what takes up a lot of the bulk. So you want to eliminate that. One other popular meal that I am making in the next couple of days is the egg roll in a bowl. And again, I'm only going to freeze the meat and vegetables cooked up, and then we're going to stir it fresh into noodles that we'll cook when it's time to eat that meal. And my kids know how to make sides like noodles and rice, obviously. So that's as far as conserving space. You really want to cut down on that. Now I'm going to give you a quick tour of my freezers to show you what it looks like. So to date, I'm not quite there. Out of the 20 breakfasts I want to make, I have made 17. And out of the 26 dinners and lunches I want to make, I have made 19. This is my kitchen freezer, and because it is my kitchen freezer, it is my #1 go-to freezer in the daytime. So there is a lot of frozen food in here for after the baby. You can see it is labeled, and you can see that it is packed tight. And here are those pans lined up nicely. But then in the bottom I still have room because there are 2 more shelves of just raw ingredients that will eventually be turned into more freezer meals. So this is the kitchen one. This has the least of the food in it. My office freezer, as you can tell, is also getting pretty full. We have a lot of frozen foods up here for after the baby, but also still some raw ingredients like vegetables and salmon that we're still eating. More vegetables down here too, as well as bread for the kids' lunches. So this one is about 2/3 filled with food for after the baby. And then the door, the bread stores really nicely there, as well as those quart containers I was telling you about. And then looking at the stand-up freezer, the top shelf has nothing for the baby. It's frozen berries and plums, as well as water. And then this shelf has a lot of the food for after baby. You can see the pan. This is one of my kids was told to put the food in the freezer, and rather than lay it flat, they did that, so it's not very space efficient. Bacon and sausages for cooking afterward for easy breakfast. And then the bottom shelf also is just a lot of vegetables and bread and sides still, so not for the baby. That will all be still eaten before the baby comes. And then in the door, you can see that once these deli containers are frozen solid, you can turn them over to fit 5 per door, or whatever your needs are. That just works well for us. So these go beautifully in the door. The vast majority of the foods that I prepare to have on hand in the freezer for after the baby comes are also in my cookbook. These are foods that we eat all the time, but they lend themselves well to freezing. Now, the one that I made here today is a quadruple batch of the spaghetti or lasagna sauce. This pot is massive. The camera does not do it justice. I believe it's a 16 or a 20 quart, so you cannot see how much food there is truly in here, but there's basically enough to fill 4 deli containers for freezing, and then enough to make 2 more servings of lasagna. So these 4 quarts are going in the fridge, and as soon as they are cold, they will be ready to move to the freezer. So this is our system. It works for us. I am feeding a family of 12, soon 13. So for us to have a dinner and a lunch, that's a very large portion. If you're wondering why would you pre-make food for after the baby? Well, the obvious reason is that you're not going to want to cook after the baby's born. But even if you feel like cooking, there could be unforeseen extenuating circumstances, such as maybe a cesarean section or other complications that do not allow you to cook. And the other thing is that even though our church has a ministry where we bring meals to moms after they have a baby, a family our size, I mean, some families eat that much food in a week as we eat for one meal, and then because people have a hard time guesstimating how much we eat, they typically tend to bring way too much food, so they really end up spending like probably double their weekly grocery budget to bring us one meal. And I just don't feel that that is a justifiable trouble for other people to have to go through, when it is fairly easy for me to double a meal when I make it and then freeze half of it, because I do have 9 months notice before the baby comes. Now, as far as timeline, I like to have all the meals in the freezer by 32 weeks of pregnancy. I am currently 30 weeks pregnant, so I'm hoping to finish up maybe by 32, 34 weeks at the latest. Part of that reason is baby could come early, and I don't know about that. The other problem is that the bigger I get, the more my belly gets in the way of the counter. And it gets to where I have to like reach over the counter like this to cook, and it becomes very uncomfortable. and cumbersome, so I like to have it finished earlier rather than later. And that way, if toward the end of the pregnancy I don't feel like cooking, I can in a pinch even pull out one of those frozen meals. If you have any specific questions, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you for watching.